compelled in their humble way to be artists. Now they sit still and permit professionals to entertain them by the aid of machinery. It is difficult to believe that general artistic culture can flourish in this atmosphere of passivity. About 15 years before, John Philip Sousa said the same thing. Here's what Sousa said: "These talking machines are going to ruin the artistic development of music in this country." Sousa was testifying here about this technology, talking machines. As he said, "When I was a boy, in front of every house in the summer evening, you would find young people together singing the songs of the day or the old songs. Today you hear these infernal machines going night and day. We will not have a vocal cord left," Sousa said. "The vocal cords will be eliminated by a process of evolution, as was the tale of man when he came from the ape," assuming you believe in evolution, of course. Now, this is a kind of cultural environmentalism. Sousa points to a certain kind of culture, the young people together singing the songs of the day or the old songs, a culture which, using modern computer terminology, we could call a kind of read-write culture. A culture where people participate in the creation and the recreation of their culture. In that sense, it's read-write. Sousa's fear was that we would lose the capacity to engage in this read-write creativity because of these, quote, infernal machines. This is a technology that would change the ecology of creativity, as Sousa saw it. It would take it away, these machines, displace it, and in its place, we'd have the opposite of read-write creativity, what we could call, using modern computer terminology, a kind of read-only culture, a different ecology of culture. Read-only in the sense that creativity is consumed, but the consumer is not a creator. Culture in this sense that's top-down, where the vocal cords of the millions of ordinary creators have been lost. Now, if you look back at the 20th century, at least in what we call the developed world, hard not to conclude that Huxley and Sousa are right. Never before in the history of human culture had culture become as concentrated. Never before had its production become as professionalized. Never before had the ordinary creativity of ordinary people been as effectively displaced, and displaced for exactly the reasons that Sousa said, because of these infernal machines. Sousa and Huxley are thus our first cultural environmentalists. Their concern was that a new technology would change the ecology of culture, shifting it from a read-only to a read-write to a read-only culture, the couch potato culture that defines what we remember the 20th century to be. So, the point is, changing technologies change ecologies, and they also change what makes sense to regulate. What made sense to be free at one time maybe needs to be regulated at another, and what made sense to regulate at one time might make sense to set free at another. So, for example, with global warming, technology changes the significance of something called carbon. The green movement is about getting people to see the harm that carbon causes and how we need to regulate carbon because of this change in technology. It shifts something that was free to something that needs to be regulated. We see that and we understand that need now, even if we understand that we didn't need to regulate carbon before. But the point is, we also need to see how this change can go the other way around. How something that we used to regulate because of technology might no longer now need to be regulated. How a new technology, against the background of an old law, can interfere with a new ecology of creativity. That's the lesson of the green culture movement. To see how the evolution of culture has changed the need to regulate culture. Digital culture has changed the need to regulate culture. Now, we can see that a little bit in the evolution that culture has happened in the context of the digital age. Think about two stages. The first stage, around 2000, a stage of extending the read-only culture from the 20th century. Massively efficient technologies to enable people to get and consume culture created elsewhere. This is the poster child of that vision of culture. Apple and their iTunes music store that allows you for 99 cents to buy whatever song you want and download it to your iPod, of course, only to your iPod, but you're guaranteed in this culture to be cool if you engage in that form of cultural consumption. It's what my colleague Paul Goldstein referred to as the celestial jukebox, where at any moment you can buy and consume whatever culture you want, of course, critically important to the spread and democratization of culture, but just one stage. Think about the second stage. Beginning, I think, around 2004, the revival of read-write culture. Here, the poster child is something like Wikipedia, but the particular version I want to focus on here I call remix. So think about remix in a bunch of contexts. First, in the context of music. Everybody knows this album by the Beatles called the White Album, which inspired this album by Jay-Z called the Black Album, which then inspired this album by DJ Danger Mouse called the Gray Album, that literally synthesized the tracks of the Black Album and White Album together to produce something gray. That's 2004. The equivalent today is something like this by Girl Talk. Girl Talk can mix 230 tracks together in one particular performance of a song. Or my favorite recent version of this. I don't know how many of you have seen this on YouTube now.
Well, what can I do? You could play that 16th note groove just straight.
So he's taking clips from YouTube and remixing it together to produce this.
Do it again. All right.
We need more than one guitar part. There'll be somebody playing single notes, somebody playing chords, and they'll mix them together.
Okay. And let's just pick the mother of all funk chords. Let's pick a ninth chord.
Okay, so through-u.com, they have a whole album composed completely by taking clips from YouTube and remixing it together to produce that extraordinary music. Or think about film. 2004, the film Tarnation made its debut at Cannes, said by the BBC